Hello everyone. Welcome to this new course that is Azure Databricks. Okay. Uh, so um, so before getting started into the Azure Databricks, okay, we'll understand the Spark basics and some of the concepts related to Hadoop. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so why MapReduce? Okay, before getting started into directly into the Azure Databricks, right? So when we talk about the days, okay, so when the data was the generation of the data was very less, right? So as time passes, right, so the huge amount of data started generating, right, and it was very difficult to store that particular data. So when I talk about like huge amount of data, it could be structured, semi-structured, or unstructured data, right? So those times like when the data was very less, okay, they were able to manage the data and they were able to store it and process it. Okay, so when as the internet evolved, right, and many people started using internet, and within minutes or seconds, the application started generating a huge, it's very huge amount of data, right? So when we talk about videos, audios, text files, emails, mails, right? So it could be anything, right? And the most challenging part was to store that particular data, and more challenging was to process that data, right? So that's what they come up with this Hadoop, right? So Hadoop file system, right? So in Hadoop file system, so there were the different three components. Okay, so we had the storage unit. Okay, so where they were able to store the amount of data, right? The amount of data which we're collecting, that is like huge amount of data. We name them as big data, right? And we stored those data in the storage unit of Hadoop file system, right? So once we had the storage unit, okay, so next we had the Mapreduce, okay, so for the processing, right? And finally we had another component called yarn, okay, for managing the resources under this Hadoop file system, right? So whatever we came up with this Mapreduce, right? So even though we have created this Mapreduce, but then also there were systems were failing. Okay, that is what the traditional systems were failing, and because like the centralized server to store and process data, which creates bottleneck, right? So this is what, okay, so and of course, like Mapreduce was Google introduces Mapreduce, and they divided the task into smaller parts and assigned them to many computers. Okay, so this is what MapReduce. This is why the MapReduce was introduced, right? So for the processing the big data. Okay, so we'll understand this. Okay, so much in detail in upcoming slides, and of course the challenges with the MapReduce were the data sharing abstraction. Okay, so there were concurrent data access to memory across the cluster, and of course there were inefficient use of resources. That is poor memory utilization by spilling to disk after each job. Okay, so then we came up with something called Spark, that is Apache Spark. Okay, you can see, so Spark is an open source unified analytics engine for large scale data processing. So this was built upon the Hadoop file system, right? So in this era of big data, okay, so where mind-blowing amount of data are being created every minute. Okay, so it is becoming increasingly important for businesses to analyze this data for quick insights, right? So this had created a demand for faster and efficient data processing technologies. So with the big data and the data science, okay, so being the buzzwords in today's world, it is no wonder why the industry is running behind the big data engines like Apache Spark, right? So considering the demand for Apache Spark, okay, Apache Spark developers, we can surely say Spark is the next generation big data tool, and it's one of the most in demand big data skills you should be knowing. So right, so if you are looking forward to getting started in this field, okay, so this is a good um approach, and yeah, and this is the right course for you, right? So in this, like, we'll understand, first we'll understand the basics of Apache Spark, then we'll move on to this Azure Databricks. We'll understand what is Databricks and Azure Databricks. So as I told you, so Apache Spark is the data processing framework, right? So that can process a task on very large data sets in very less time. So this was built upon the Hadoop, okay, so which is fast and flexible, which was originally developed at Berkeley. Okay, so and Spark went on to become the largest open source community in the big data, so which is being regarded as one of the best and most widely used big data processing frameworks in the world. So then on, like, it was extremely adopted by the major enterprises across the various industries. So Apache Spark is a distributed data processing framework, okay, so which can rapidly process large data by distributing the task across the multiple nodes, right? Where we deploying the Spark at the massive scale, which facilitates high speed processing of even petabytes of data on clusters of thousands of nodes. Okay, so in fact, we can carry on the large scale data processing, which is 100 times faster than Hadoop. Okay, and Spark can perform a batch as well as stream processing. Okay, so which comes under the components, which will look into this. Okay, so which makes Spark powerful engine that can process the data in both real time and even in the batch mode. Okay, so of course, like being built on Scala. So Spark supports multiple languages, right? So by providing APIs for Scala, Java, Python, and largest one that is being R, right? So this is the key feature of Spark, which makes it flexible for developers to create and run applications in language of their convenience. So there are many use cases, okay, so where this Spark is used, okay, so we'll get into this. Okay, so as I told you, so it is a fast and efficient, which supports the structured, semi-structured or unstructured of data. Okay, so in terms of when we talk about the type of data which we are able to store it and process it, so it in memory engine, so which is 100 times faster than the Hadoop. It is highly scalable architecture, okay, so which can process even the terabyte of data, okay, so in parallel. And it unifies a variety of use cases. Okay, so there are many use cases. Like today almost every industry deal with the big data, right? So for many of these industries, so Apache Spark is the top choice considering its amazing features and the numerous advantages that it provides. So Spark is widely used, okay, so by many companies ranging across almost every industry, and it is deployed at the massive scale, collectively processing multiple petabytes of data on clusters over thousands of nodes. So here are some of the industries that are Spark dealing with, like with the three V's of big data. Okay, so when we talk about big data, of course, we talk about three V's, right? That is volume, velocity, and variety, right? So so today, even like when we talk about the different sectors, like whether it's media and entertainment industry, right? So being one of the fastest growing industry, so it's moving towards online streaming, right? So leading industries like Netflix use Apache Spark for the real-time streaming processing to process billions of events per day for the purpose of providing personalized online recommendations to its customers, right? And even like in the finance sectors, so it's another industry where the real-time processing plays a very important role. So an Apache Spark is used to analyze and gain the quick insights into aspects like customer segmentation, target advertisement, credit risk assessment, customer and of course the fraud detection, right? So in the transactions and many more things, right, for the right decisions making process in the business. So another sector where this Spark has a very important role is the healthcare industry, okay, where it is used to analyze the large volumes of patients health records and clinical data to gain quick and useful insights. Okay, so even like coming to the travel industry, so leading travel websites and apps like TripAdvisor or any other platforms, okay, uses this Apache Spark to speed up the customized recommendations to its users. And of course, last but not least, an industry that is inseparable from the data analysis and target advertisement is e-commerce, right? E-commerce and retail sector. The leaders in e-commerce like Alibaba and eBay use the Spark to analyze the petabytes of data, and some of such use cases of Spark are targeted advertising, then personalized recommendations, and many more things. So this is what. So it helps in batch processing, streaming, ingestion, machine learning, and advanced analytics. Okay. So when I was talking about Hadoop, right? So the first they founded was Hadoop, right? So where the Hadoop file systems are the three different major components. We have a storage unit. Then we had a Mapreduce, okay, for the processing, and the yarn to run the which is a framework to manage all the resources, right? So of course HDFS, there is Hadoop file system, which is a file system to manage the storage of the data. Then we have a MapReduce, right? So Mapreduce, it's a framework to define a data processing task. Okay, so Mapreduce, of course, we know, right, so that we have a different steps there, right? So when we have input, then what we do, we split the data. Okay, so then after splitting, what we do, okay, so then when we'll have the mapping, right? After mapping, then we'll, of course, we do the shuffling, and finally we'll reduce it, right? This is what certain steps we follow in the Mapreduce also, right? And finally, we have a yarn, which is the framework to run the data processing task. Okay, so this is how the coordination between the Hadoop blocks takes place, right? So step one, which users defines a map and reduce the task using the Mapreduce API. In the steps two, the yarn takes care of resources, because of course to run this any to for the analysis, of course we need the network, we need RAM and CPU, and of course many more things, right? So the yarn take care of this resources allocation and figure out where and how to run this particular job. And finally, in the step three, yarn store the result in Hadoop file system, that is storage unit in the Hadoop file system. So when we talk about the Spark, right? So Spark, Apache Spark ecosystem, and there are some of its components. Okay, so where Spark incorporates various inbuilt libraries and components. Okay, so you can see like we have Spark Core, we have a Spark SQL, Spark Streaming, Spark Ml Lib, and Spark Graphics, right? So these are some of the major components. Okay, so when we talk about the Spark Core, okay, so the basic functionalities of Spark are built upon the Spark Core. It incorporates RDDs, right? So RDD is basically resilient distributed data sets. Okay, so which is one of the Spark's main abstractions. The Spark core is responsible for the task scheduling, then fault recovery, in-memory computation, and memory management. Okay, so it serves as a foundation for the processing of large data sets. That is what the Spark core is. Okay, this is some of the functionalities. When we talk about Spark SQL, okay, so it is a module of Spark that provides a SQL interface to Spark for working with structured and semi-structured data and executing SQL queries on them. Then we have a Spark streaming. Okay, it's not streaming, it's streaming. It is a Spark component, okay, even which is built upon the Spark core, that is responsible for high throughput, scalable, and fault tolerant stream processing of continuous flowing data streams obtained from data streams such as Apache Kafka or Flume and Kinesis, right? AWS, Amazon Kinesis. So next we have a Spark ML Lib. Okay, so it is a Spark library that facilitates the implementation of machine learning and deep learning algorithms and makes machine learning scalable, right? So next we have a Spark graphics, right? So it is also a Spark API for manipulating and working with the graphs and executing the graph parallel computations, right? So of course, like on the other hand, so as I told you, so Spark core, the entire Spark, right, ecosystem is built upon the Hadoop file system. Okay, so this is what you can see. Like we have yarn and HT, that is Hadoop file system, right? So of course, like when we talk about Spark, right? So starting from the data collection, okay, followed by data cleaning and data engineering to advanced analytics, okay, so through training, evaluation, and the validation of machine learning models for providing meaningful insights from the data, a unified framework like Apache Spark will provide an end-to-end solution to it. And there are many major steps, okay, so involved in the process are like collecting the data, analyzing the data, cleaning the data. Then we have feature engineering, exploring and generating insights from the data by building the machine learning models, right? So, and Spark has a variety of role in each of these steps. Okay, so so of course you can see, so these are some of the features. It provides native support and it has real time as well as the batch processing. Then supports for the, as I told you, so it supports the multiple languages, right? So this is how it works. Okay, so when we talk about the major components like RDD, right? So RDDs are very important. That's when we are talking about the Spark. Of course, we need to understand about the RDDs as well. So you can see, so RDDs are the still fundamental blocks, right? So are fundamental building blocks of Spark. Okay, and RDD is a collection of entities. Okay, so it could be rows, it could be records, or it could be anything, right? So, so before Okay, we'll not get into much in detail like how to create the RDDs and other stuff, right? So these are some of the concepts. If you know, it's very well and good. Okay, so just remember, this is a collection of rows and records. Okay, and so all the operations that is in Spark are performed in memory objects. Like there are two types of methods, whether it's action return value. That action could be a written value, and it could be we can apply the transformation. So this is some of the characteristics of RDD. So that is partition, which is the split across the nodes, data nodes in the cluster. Okay, so that is what the data is spread across the clusters. Then it is immutable. Thus, RDDs are once created cannot be changed, and it's resilient. Cannot be reconstructed even if the can be reconstructed. Okay, even if the node crashes. This is when we talk about partition. Okay, so which of course we have a parallel processing. The main reason for splitting of data across multiple nodes is a parallelization. So data can be processed in parallel on all of these individual nodes. You can see, like as an example, we have a two nodes where the data has been split into two nodes, right? And data stored in memory for each node in a cluster. That is the most important thing about the Spark, is that the contents of this RDD are kept entirely in the memory across the multiple cluster nodes. So of course it is immutable, so RDD cannot be muted. As we told, so there are in-memory operations that it could be a transformation action, so where we can request a result or transform into another RDD. So this is an example for immutables. Of course, we can't change the data, right? So next, it provides the it has the lazy evaluation, right? So where the Spark keeps a record of the series of transformations requested by the user, and it groups the transformation efficient way when an action is requested. Okay, so this is what about the lazy evaluation. Okay, so when we talk about resilient, Spark keeps a record of series of transformations requested by the user. Okay, and we can create RDD by two ways: one by reading a file, and by transforming into another RDD, right? So this is all we have discussed. The allow RDD to be reconstructed when the node crashes, and allow RDD to lazily materialized when the accessing the results. Okay, so when we talk about the data frame, okay, so of course, like data frame, where we have arranged the data in terms of rows and columns. Okay, right? Apache Spark API has the two ways. Okay, where the RDD is represented. One is data frame, that is untyped API, and we have a data set, that is typed API. Okay, so this is what the major differences. We talk about RDDs and datasets. Okay, so RDDs is a primary abstraction since initial versions. Okay, and datasets is added to the Spark in the version 1.6. Okay, and RDD is immutable and distributed. Datasets also immutable and distributed. RDDs strong typing and uses of lambda functions, and also supports in the datasets, also supports strong typing and the lambdas. So it's available in all languages. So data is available in Scala, Java, not Python or R. Okay, that is what you need to remember. Okay, so of course there's no optimized execution here. It leverages the optimizers in the recent versions. Okay, so when you compare the data sets and the data frames, okay, so now the data set is already in version 1.6, and data frame was added in 1.3. It is mutable and distributed. Of course, the data frames are immutable, right? So it's also immutable and distributed. There's no named columns in datasets, but in the data frames we have named columns like pandas or R, right? And so data frames are available in all languages, and datasets it's present in only in Scala, Java, and not in Python and R. Okay, so and it compile time safely, and there's a no type there's a no type safely at compile time. Okay, so API for datasets and data frames have been merged in version 2.0. Okay, so now this is what the latest updates which we have in Apache Spark, right? So it has the infrastructure management, updated challenges, user interface, manual. This is some of the difficult, what makes Apache Spark difficult to use, right? So and we have come up with other solutions. Of course, when talk about in terms of like infrastructure management, like and challenges in the upgrades, when we talk about user interface, a manual configuration, and which is difficult to collaborate on multiple projects, and tooling and integration complexity. Okay, so that's where we come into Databricks. Okay, so which will be understanding what is Databricks in the next video. So I hope you understood the basics of what is Hadoop file system, what are its components, and what is Apache Spark, right? So now we'll get into what is Databricks in the next video.